Welcome again to another version of Lightest and Best, where we look at the lightest and best offerings from a variety of manufacturers. And today we're going to look at the Burger EXK knife. This is the EXK in full titanium, and actually the lightest of the Trevor Burger line is the field grade, which is carbon fiber. It's a liner lock instead of a frame lock like this, but instead of 3.6 ounces, it weighs only 2.17 ounces. It's 40% lighter. I just happen to have the full titanium frame lock, and so that's what we'll be reviewing today. There are different versions. The carbon fiber liner lock, the field grade, is $550. This one, which is full titanium, is $650. It's a little higher quality. And there's a higher quality yet. There's the signature and signature engraved, which are more like custom knives. I'll talk about the carbon fiber frame lock or the field grade first. As I've mentioned, it's 2.17 ounces, which is 40% lighter than this. It has a lower grade steel. It's N690 instead of this one, which has M390. The blade stock is more narrow at 120 thousandths instead of 158 1,000ths. And the pocket clip is surface mounted. This one has a 3D milled clip instead of a surface mounted spring clip. And there's also a Burger EXK. And Excalibur is a word played on the two designers that were involved in the project, Mice Skellum and Fred Berger, who is Trevor Burger's father. It was a collaborative effort. And the blade on the Burger EXK is longer. It's 3.5 inches. This one is the small EXK, which has a 2.75 inch blade. The larger EXK has a 3.3 inch blade. And the Excalibur goes for only $106 as opposed to this one being $650. And as I mentioned, it's a 3-inch titanium frame lock. It is much less expensive. We'll talk about the specifications of the blade we're reviewing, however. As I mentioned, it's 2.75 inches with the blade. The larger is 3.3 inches. The handle is 3.75 inches long, giving a total knife length of 6.5 inches. The weight is 6.3 ounces. The blade is made of an M390. It's stone-watched. It has a high hollow ground. It's in a drop point configuration. And it has swedging and jimping on the spine. As you'll notice, the proximal jimping has to do with the flipper deployment, and the later jimping has to do with grip on the handle. I'll just close it and show you. The flipper deploys. You grab the really sharp, fine jimping and deploy it like that. We'll compare it to some other knives. There is the Berger A2, which is also a front flipper knife. There's the Rockstead Heisen, and the Rockstead Heisen is a little bit larger. I want to compare it with the Reate Wave. The Reate Wave is a little larger. And the Spyderco Native 5, which is a little larger. And lastly, the Browse Insight, which is a little larger. The method of deployment I've mentioned is a lower front flipper, so the front flipper is placed there, and with the upper front flipper you can flip it up here, but with the lower one it's best flipped with the thumb, and you can move it either slow and deploy it like that in very controlled slow form, or you can do it rapidly. Of course, rapidly is my preferred method. I want to contrast that with another front flipper with South African design, which is the Berger Plus A2. It has a front flipper placed much higher, and instead of using the thumb, you can use the forefinger to flip it out like that. And that's because it's much higher. I'll just compare the two. The high flipper versus the low flipper. This you can do with the index finger, and the EXK is best done with the thumb. Well, it provides a sleek minimalist pocket presence and not widening the knife with a flipper tab. And there are some flipper tabs that are very, very wide, but as you can see, the front flipper, the flipper does not extend beyond the knife scale, so it gives it a sleek presence in your pocket. The handle on the EXK, on this one anyway, is titanium. As I mentioned, they also make a carbon fiber version, but it's only a liner lock. It has a flow-through design with 2 standoffs, 1, 2, and there's no interior milling on this particular knife. The pivot runs on bearings, and there are 2 different custom pivots for the external pivot. On the show side, there is a 5-hole pivot, and on the clip side, there's a 3-hole pivot. The lock bar has an over-travel stop, which is the pivot collar, and then there's interior milling where your finger goes to release the lock bar, which makes it easy to release. And this is very similar to the Browse Insight, and I'll show you the interior pocketing that they have too. This is a very easy way to release a lock bar, and I really like it. There are different ways to do that, however. Let's look at the Rockstead Heisen. It doesn't have those interior cutouts. However, on the show side scale, it has a little divot here so you can still access easily the lock bar to release it. It's just 2 different ways. With the interior milling way, you can have symmetric handle scales on the scale side and the show side. With this side, it has a little place to put your finger there, and so it helps with handle ergonomics. Both are very acceptable ways of doing it. The pocket clip on the EXK is a 3D milled titanium clip. It's held with external screws, and the clip rides on the frame, not on the lock bar. And as you can tell, that's good because the Reeves Sebenza rides on the frame. Here's a comparison between the Reeves Sebenza clip and the Burger EXK clip. As you can tell, the Reeves Sebenza clip rides on the lock bar, and it has a theoretic disadvantage in that when you grip the lock bar and deploy the knife, really you're pressing the detent ball and the lock bar against the blade, so it tends to make it not deploy as well. However, whenever the lock bar or the pocket clip is against the frame, you can flip it open very nicely without any problems whatsoever. The ergonomics on the knife are very good. Feels good in the hand. There's a place to put your first finger and then the others follow course. The action, it has a 15-degree detent angle where the detent ball falls off the blade, and the opening is very smooth. Of all the knives I have, this is one of my favorite knives that I just love to open and close because the action is so smooth, and it's really interesting. You have to practice with the front flipper a little bit, but once you master it, it's really fun to open and close. So what are my impressions about the Burger EXK? I really like it. Are there opportunities for improvement? Very few, but I'll point out a couple that are just pet peeves with me. First of all, the pivots it has can't be released unless you have a proprietary tool, and there are 2 different pivots. On the show side, it has a 5-hole pivot, and on the scale side, on the clip side, it has a 3-hole pivot. So you need 2 different pivot tools to disassemble this knife. I have neither. I would have to order them from South Africa, I would assume. So really functionally, until I do that, I can't take the knife apart and clean it. The other thing I would improve about it would be that the pocket clip is external screws rather than internal screws. And I'll give you some example of knives that have 3D milled clip with internal screws. First is the Browse Blades Insight, which you've seen previously, and then the Riate Wave. These are both screwed from the inside, and you don't have those screws showing from the outside. I think it's a great design choice. But what do I like about the knife? I love it that it's a front flipper. The front flipper style is unique. It's distinctive of South African knife makers, and it provides a sleek, minimalist pocket present. Because whenever the knife is closed, you don't have a flipper tab sticking out. The flipper tab is flush mounted with the knife. The lock bar on this knife I also love because it has these easy access cutouts. It's easy to release the lock bar. It's effortless. And I also love the steel, the M390 steel on the blade. As you can tell, on the show side, there's the Berger's maker mark. And then on the clip side, it's completely sterile and it has that beautiful stonewash on it. So, if you wanted a South African style front flipping knife, I would recommend the Burger EXK. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next knife video.